The community hall was full that evening. It was the kind of night when everyone in the small town came together, families with little kids, old couples sitting in the back rows, teenagers whispering and giggling, and friends waving at each other across the room. The air was light and filled with excitement. It was the annual talent night, something the whole town looked forward to every year. There were jokes, magic tricks, a few dance acts, and even a boy trying to juggle oranges who dropped them every few seconds, making everyone laugh. The audience was cheerful and warm. It wasn't a serious competition, just a night for fun and laughter. People clapped, cheered, and shouted friendly comments from their seats. Then, near the end of the list of performers, a name appeared on the screen that made everyone whisper. Next up, we have Tommy Reynolds. Heads turned. Some people chuckled. Tommy, the mechanic? Someone said. Another whispered, is he really performing? Everyone in town knew Tommy. He was the quiet guy who worked at the local auto repair shop. He was the one who always had oil stains on his hands, the one who fixed your car without charging too much. He was kind, polite, but not someone people ever imagined standing on a stage. He rarely talked much, and when he did, it was usually about engines, tires, or spare parts. So when his name was called, people thought it must be some kind of joke. Maybe he was going to do a funny skit about cars, or maybe he lost a bet and had to come on stage. Nobody expected anything serious. The host smiled in a teasing way and said into the mic, well, this should be interesting. Let's give a big round of applause for Tommy Reynolds. The crowd clapped, some people laughing lightly. Then Tommy walked onto the stage. He wasn't wearing anything fancy, just his usual jeans, a clean shirt, and work boots that looked like they'd seen better days. In his hands, he carried an old guitar. The wood was scratched and faded. The strings looked worn, but he held it carefully, almost lovingly. As he stood under the bright stage lights, he looked out at the crowd for a moment. He wasn't used to having so many eyes on him. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The hall felt too big, the lights too bright. For a second, he thought about walking back down those steps and pretending it never happened. But then, something inside him whispered, you've waited long enough. He walked to the mic stand, set the guitar strap over his shoulder, and adjusted the microphone. The mic squeaked a little and people chuckled again. He smiled nervously. From somewhere in the crowd, someone called out jokingly, play us a country tune, Tommy. The audience laughed again. Tommy smiled shyly, but he didn't say anything. He looked down at his guitar, took a deep breath, and placed his fingers on the strings. For a few seconds, there was silence. Just the sound of the air conditioner humming softly in the background. Then he played the first note. The sound that came out of that guitar changed the entire room. It wasn't loud or flashy, it was warm, deep, and full of emotion. The laughter stopped instantly. Heads turned. The kids who had been whispering went quiet. Tommy's fingers moved with confidence, creating a melody that filled the hall with something beautiful and unexpected. Nobody could believe what they were hearing. The shy mechanic from the car shop was playing like someone who had lived and breathed music his entire life. As he played, something changed in his face. The nervousness disappeared. His eyes softened, and there was a small, peaceful smile on his lips. It was as if he wasn't in that hall anymore. He was somewhere else, lost in the music. Then he began to sing. His voice was calm and deep, the kind that carries a story in every word. He sang about quiet dreams, about life passing by too fast, about working hard and trying not to give up. The lyrics were simple, but they touched something real. It was the kind of song that didn't need fancy words. It spoke straight to the heart. Some people in the audience blinked back tears without even realizing it. The same people who had laughed a few minutes ago were now sitting in silence, completely still, not wanting to miss a single note. When the song ended, Tommy looked up, unsure of what to do next. He thought maybe he had made a mistake by coming here. Maybe no one liked it. But then, for a brief moment, there was complete silence, like the whole room had forgotten to breathe. Then came the sound of applause. It started with one person clapping, then another, and then suddenly the whole hall was on its feet. The clapping turned into cheering, whistles, and shouts of encore. Tommy's eyes widened. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. He gave a small, grateful smile and nodded slightly before walking off the stage. Behind the curtain, he sat down on a chair, still holding his guitar. His hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from disbelief. For the first time in years, he had played in front of people, and they had loved it. As the show went on, people kept talking about him. Where did he learn to play like that? I had no idea he could sing. That was incredible. In the crowd, a few people pulled out their phones, watching the short video clips they'd recorded of his performance. Even though the lighting wasn't perfect and the sound was a bit rough, the emotion in his music came through clearly. One teenager said, "I'm posting this online. Everyone needs to see this." That night, as the talent show ended, Tommy quietly helped fold chairs and clear up, like he always did after community events. He didn't want to stand out. But people came up to him, neighbors, old customers, even the mayor, shaking his hand, telling him how amazing he was. He smiled shyly, thanked them, and told them he just wanted to share a little music. Deep down, though, something inside him had awakened. On his way home, he walked the quiet streets with his guitar slung over his shoulder. The streetlights cast long shadows on the road. He could still hear the echo of the applause in his head. He smiled to himself. For years, he had played that same song alone in his small living room, never thinking anyone would care to listen. That night proved he was wrong. When he got home, he placed the guitar gently in its old case. It was the same guitar his mother had saved up to buy for him when he was a teenager. It wasn't expensive, but it was priceless to him. He ran his fingers along the wood and whispered softly, "You still sound good, old friend." He made himself a cup of tea, sat on the couch, and thought about the night. He remembered the laughter before he played, the silence during the song, and the cheers afterward. It all felt like a dream. He didn't know that the little video someone posted of him that night was already starting to spread online. Within a few days, it would reach thousands of people, then millions. But for now, Tommy just sat quietly, smiling, not realizing that this was only the beginning. Everyone had thought it was a joke, but the moment he played that first note, everything changed. The next morning, the town felt a little different. The sun rose as it always did, spilling golden light across the quiet streets, but something in the air had changed. People were talking at the grocery store, at the bus stop, outside the cafe. Everyone was talking about the same thing, the mechanic who played like a professional musician. Inside the small repair shop at the corner of Main Street, Tommy was already at work. He had opened early as usual. The smell of oil and gasoline filled the air, mixed with the faint sound of old country music playing from the radio. He was tightening bolts under a rusty pickup truck when the bell above the door jingled. It was Mr. Brown, a longtime customer. Well, if it isn't the town's new star," he said with a grin. Tommy slid out from under the truck, wiping his hands with a rag, looking puzzled. "What are you talking about?" he asked quietly. Mr. Brown chuckled. "Don't play shy, son. Everyone saw that video of you playing last night. It's all over Facebook. My daughter showed it to me first thing this morning." Tommy froze for a second. "Video?" he repeated softly. "Yep," Mr. Brown said, leaning on the counter. "Somebody filmed your whole performance. It's going viral, I tell you. I've already seen people sharing it with captions like, 'The mechanic who made the whole town cry.' You've got talent, boy. Real talent." Tommy smiled nervously and tried to brush it off. It was just for fun," he said, pretending to focus on his work again, but inside his heart was racing. Viral him? That didn't make sense. He wasn't some celebrity. He was just a guy who fixed cars and sang when no one was listening. As the day went on, more people came by the shop, not all for car repairs. Some just wanted to talk to him, to congratulate him, or to tell him how much they loved his song. A few even asked if he'd play again at the next community event. By lunchtime, even the mailman mentioned it. "Tommy, you've got fans now," he said, handing over a pile of letters. "You might need to hire a bodyguard soon." Tommy laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, right." But when the mailman left, he sat down for a moment on a small wooden stool near the window. The sunlight fell across his hands, still stained with oil. He picked up the rag again, but his mind wasn't on work anymore. That song, the way people reacted, the way it felt to play again after so many years, it all kept replaying in his mind. That evening, when the shop closed, Tommy went home, made himself some dinner, and sat down with his old guitar. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. He turned on his phone and opened the video everyone had been talking about. He hesitated for a moment before pressing play. The video started with him walking nervously on stage, the laughter in the crowd, and then the first note. As he watched himself play, he saw what others had seen. A man who had carried his music quietly for years, letting it out in one powerful moment. The comments under the video caught his attention. "Who is this guy? This song made me cry. You can feel his pain and hope in every note. Reminds me of my dad. Beautiful." Tommy's eyes softened as he scrolled through hundreds of kind words from strangers. People were sharing their own stories in the comments about giving up dreams, about holding on to hope, about second chances. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. He turned off the phone and sat quietly for a while. Then, without thinking much, he started strumming again. The sound filled the room, soft, calm, familiar. He closed his eyes and played until midnight, just like he used 2 years ago. A few days passed and life started to change in small ways. People he barely knew began greeting him on the street. At the grocery store, the cashier smiled and said, "I loved your song." A teacher from the local school asked if he could come talk to the students about music. He didn't know how to handle all the attention. He was humble by nature and didn't like to be in the spotlight. But deep inside, a spark had been lit. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. One afternoon, while he was closing the shop, a woman walked in. She looked professional, holding a clipboard and a warm smile. "Hi," she said. "I'm from the local radio station. We saw your video online and we'd love to invite you to our morning show for an interview. Maybe you could play a song live for our listeners?" Tommy blinked, unsure what to say. I've never done anything like that before," he stammered. She smiled kindly. "That's okay. That's what makes it special. People love your story." The mechanic with a voice that touched hearts. "Just think about it, okay?" She handed him her card and left. Tommy stood there for a long time after she was gone, staring at the card. His mind was racing. A radio interview? That was way out of his comfort zone, but another part of him whispered again, "You've waited long enough." That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his mother and the promise he'd made to her long ago, to never stop playing. She had been the one who believed in him the most. Before she passed away, she told him, "Don't let life take your music away. One day it'll find its way back to you." Maybe this was what she meant the next morning. He called the radio station and said yes. A few days later, he found himself sitting in a small studio, surrounded by microphones and blinking red lights. The host smiled warmly. "So, Tommy, everyone in town knows you now. How does it feel to be an overnight sensation?" Tommy laughed softly. "Honestly, it feels strange. I never planned any of this. I just wanted to play a song that meant something to me." The host nodded. "Well, it definitely meant something to a lot of people. Would you like to play a bit of it for us?" Tommy nodded, adjusting the guitar in his lap. He took a deep breath and began to play. Even through the radio speakers, his voice carried emotion that reached everyone listening. People driving to work pulled over just to listen. In coffee shops and kitchens across town, people stopped talking and turned up the volume. When the song ended, the studio was silent for a moment. The host leaned closer and said quietly, "That was beautiful. Thank you." The next day, the radio station's social media was flooded with messages from listeners saying how much they loved his song. A few even asked where they could buy his music. But Tommy didn't have any recordings. He just smiled when he read the comments. It wasn't about fame or money for him. It was about the music finding its way to people who needed it. One evening, as the sun was setting, Tommy walked down to the small park near his home. The air smelled of fresh grass and children were playing in the distance. He sat on a bench with his guitar looking at the sky. A young boy approached him shyly. "Are you the man from the video?" he asked. Tommy smiled. "I guess I am. My mom plays your song in the car every day," the boy said. "She says it makes her feel happy. Can you teach me how to play the guitar someday?" Tommy's eyes softened. "Of course," he said gently. "Anytime." As the boy ran back to his family, Tommy strummed a few quiet chords. The sound drifted through the park, soft and peaceful. He thought about how strange life could be. How one small moment, one brave decision could change everything. Everyone had laughed when he walked on that stage. They thought it was a joke. But that single note had changed their laughter into silence and their silence into admiration. And now, his story was only beginning. After the radio show, things began to change faster than Tommy ever expected. The video of him playing at the talent night had already gathered hundreds of thousands of views online. Now, after the live performance on the radio, it was spreading even more. People shared it with captions like "Real music still exists" and "The voice of a true heart." For a man who had lived most of his life quietly, it was almost too much to take in. At the repair shop, cars kept coming as usual, but customers now stayed longer. They wanted to talk, to ask about his music, to share how his song made them feel. Some brought their kids just to meet him, but Tommy was still the same man. He fixed cars, wiped his hands on his old rag, smiled politely, and thanked everyone for their kind words. Deep down, though, something was stirring inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. It wasn't fame that moved him. It was the feeling that people were finally hearing what he had carried in his heart all these years. That evening, after closing the shop, he walked home with the same old guitar on his shoulder. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. The wind was gentle and the streets were quiet. When he reached his small house, he went straight to the living room, sat down, and placed the guitar on his lap. For a while, he just sat there, staring at it. His reflection looked back at him in the glossy wood. He began to remember the past, the years when music wasn't just a hobby, but his whole world. When he was younger, Tommy had dreams that reached far beyond the town. He used to play in small bars and coffee shops, traveling to nearby cities with nothing but his guitar and a few dollars in his pocket. People loved his voice, and a few even said he could make it big someday. He believed them too. Back then, every stage felt like a promise, every song like a step closer to something greater. But dreams don't always follow the path we plan. One night, after a small show, he received a call that changed everything. His father had fallen seriously ill. Tommy rushed back home, leaving everything behind. His mother needed help running the house and taking care of his father, so he stayed. What was supposed to be a short visit turned into months, and then years. The bills piled up. The gigs stopped coming. One day, out of desperation, he took a job at a small garage to help pay for the medicine his father needed. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd get back to music once things got better. But life had other plans. His father passed away 2 years later, and his mother's health began to decline soon after. By then, the dream had slipped further away. The world had moved on. New musicians came and went, and Tommy stayed, working at the same garage day after day, fixing engines instead of chasing melodies. But he never stopped playing completely. Every night after work, when the town was asleep, he'd take out his old guitar and play softly by the window. The music became his quiet companion, his way of remembering who he once was. His mother used to sit in her rocking chair, listening. Sometimes she'd smile through her tired eyes and say, "You were born to play, son. Don't let life steal that from you." He'd nod, but deep down he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. When she passed away, it left a hole in his heart that even music couldn't fill. For months, he didn't touch the guitar at all. It just sat in the corner, gathering dust. He focused on work, keeping himself busy so he wouldn't have to think too much. Years passed quietly. The boy who once dreamed of bright lights and big stages had become the man people now called the town mechanic. And maybe that's how it would have stayed if not for that. One night at the community talent show, a few days after the radio performance, Tommy was sitting in the shop when the bell over the door rang again. He looked up and saw a woman holding a camera bag. She smiled warmly. "Hi," she said. "I'm from the local newspaper. I'd love to do a feature on you, your story, your music, everything." Tommy hesitated. He wasn't sure if he wanted that kind of attention, but something about her tone felt genuine, so he agreed. They sat in the corner of the shop, surrounded by the smell of oil and old tires. The reporter asked him about his life, how he learned to play, and why he chose that particular song for the talent show. He paused for a long moment before answering. "That song," he said quietly, "was the first one I ever wrote. I wrote it for my parents. They both loved music, but life never gave them much time to enjoy it. My dad used to work long hours, and my mom, well, she was my biggest supporter. I promised her I'd keep playing no matter what. But I guess I lost my way for a while." The reporter listened silently as he spoke, her recorder catching every word. "I didn't play for a long time," he continued, "but that night I don't know. I felt like she was telling me to play again. like she was there in that crowd watching. When the interview was published a week later, people all over town were moved by his story. They saw the man behind the music, the struggles, the love, the quiet strength it took to keep going when dreams seemed lost. A few days later, Tommy received a message from a local music teacher who ran a small school for kids. She invited him to come speak to her students. "They need to see what real passion looks like," she said in her note. He wasn't sure what he could teach anyone, but he went anyway. When he walked into the classroom, a dozen young faces turned toward him with wide eyes. One little girl raised her hand and asked, "Did you really fix cars and sing at the same time?" The room burst into laughter and Tommy chuckled too. "Not exactly at the same time," he said kindly. "But yes, I fixed cars during the day and played music when I could." He told them about how dreams don't have to disappear just because life gets hard. He told them that sometimes, even if you take a different path, what's meant for you will find you again. Then one of the kids handed him a small guitar and said shyly, "Can you play something?" He smiled, sat down, and played a soft tune. The children listened quietly, their eyes full of wonder. When he finished, they clapped and cheered. It was a small classroom, but to Tommy, it felt like the biggest stage in the world. As he walked out of the school, the teacher thanked him. "You don't know what you just did," she said. "You gave them hope." Tommy nodded with a gentle smile. "They gave me something too," he replied. That night, sitting on his porch with his guitar, Tommy thought about everything that had happened. The laughter that turned into silence, the applause, the video, the messages from strangers, the kids' smiles. He realized something important. Music wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about connection, about touching hearts, one song at a time. He looked up at the stars and whispered softly, "You were right, Mom. The music never really left." The wind rustled through the trees, almost like a quiet answer. From that day on, Tommy decided to keep playing. Not for the world, not for fame, but simply because it made him feel alive. The mechanic who once worked in silence had found his voice again, and it all started with a single note. The morning sun crept through the window of Tommy's little house, lighting up the small table where his old guitar rested. The town was slowly waking up, but for him things hadn't been the same for weeks. Everywhere he went, someone recognized him. When he stopped at the bakery for coffee, the cashier smiled. "You're the man from the video, right? My husband plays your song in the car every morning." At the gas station, someone waved and shouted, "Hey, play that song again for us sometime." Even at the grocery store, people came up to him, thanking him for sharing his music. It was strange at first. After all, he had spent years blending into the background, fixing cars quietly, barely noticed by anyone. But now he couldn't go anywhere without a friendly nod or a handshake. Tommy never imagined that something as small as a song could change so much. But deep inside, he still saw himself as just the same simple man. He didn't see a star in the mirror, just someone who happened to love music and got lucky one night. One evening, while he was closing up the repair shop, a car pulled up outside. A young man stepped out holding a small camera and a microphone. "Hi, sir," the young man said, smiling nervously. "I'm from a local YouTube channel. We tell inspiring stories from small towns. Everyone's been talking about you, and we'd love to make a short video about your journey." Tommy rubbed the grease off his hands and smiled politely. "I don't know if my story is that special," he said softly. The young man laughed. "Sir, the internet disagrees. Your video already has over 5 million views." Tommy froze. 5 million? The man nodded. "And climbing every day." For a moment, Tommy didn't know what to say. He'd never thought about numbers like that. It wasn't something he understood. But 5 million meant millions of people had heard his music. Millions of hearts had connected with what he played. The thought was overwhelming. The young man spent the next hour asking questions, filming a bit around the shop and capturing small moments. Tommy fixing an engine, wiping his hands, tuning his guitar. He didn't want to do anything fancy. He just wanted the video to show the real man behind the music. Before leaving, the young man said, "People need stories like yours. It reminds them that it's never too late to dream again." Tommy smiled and nodded, but after the door closed, he sat for a while, lost in thought. Maybe the young man was right. Maybe his story wasn't just about music. It was about not giving up even when life changes your plans. A few days later, the video was uploaded. It was titled, the mechanic who touched the world with a song. The comments began pouring in from every corner of the internet. People wrote, "I played this video for my dad. He cried. This reminds me to chase my passion again. His voice feels like a hug for the heart. Please tell him to record more songs." The short film went viral within a week. Soon, people from other countries started messaging him, asking where they could listen to more of his music. Tommy couldn't believe it. The old guitar that had sat in his living room for years was suddenly the reason strangers were finding hope. One afternoon, while he was working at the shop, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. When he answered, a warm voice said, "Hello, Mr. Reynolds. I'm calling from a small music label. We've seen your story and we'd love to meet you." Tommy laughed nervously. "A music label? Are you sure you've got the right number?" The caller chuckled. "Oh, yes, sir. You're the right one. We'd like you to record that song in a studio. The world deserves to hear it properly." Tommy was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about studios or music deals." The man replied, "That's exactly why people love your story. You're real. Just think about it. No pressure." When the call ended, Tommy sat on the workbench for a long time. He stared at his guitar case, feeling both excited and scared. He didn't know if he was ready for that kind of step. He didn't want to lose the simplicity of why he played, to express, to remember, to connect. That night he sat outside on the porch, the quiet hum of crickets around him. He looked at the stars just like he used to with his mother years ago. He could almost hear her voice saying softly, "Go where the music takes you, son." The next morning he called the number back. "I'll do it," he said simply. A week later, Tommy found himself standing inside a recording studio for the first time in his life. The equipment looked like something from another world. Microphones hanging from metal stands, glowing buttons, and glass panels separating the recording room from the control booth. The sound engineer smiled. "You nervous?" Tommy laughed. "A little. I've only ever played for small crowds. Never like this." "Well," the engineer said kindly, "just pretend you're back home. Play like no one's watching." He nodded and adjusted the guitar strap on his shoulder. The lights were dim and the room was quiet. He took a deep breath and began to play the same song that had started it all, the one he had written for his parents. As the first note filled the room, everyone listening through the glass fell silent. The melody carried warmth, pain, love, and peace all at once. His voice was raw, honest, and pure, just like the night he first sang it at the town hall. When the final chord faded, there was a long pause before the engineer pressed the intercom and said softly, "That was perfect," Tommy smiled shyly. "You sure you don't need another take?" The man shook his head. "No, you can't recreate that kind of feeling. That's the kind of thing people remember forever." A month later, the song was officially released online. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't filled with effects or heavy instruments. It was just a man, his voice, and a guitar. Within days, it hit millions of plays. People shared it everywhere with captions like, "This song healed something in me," and "Simple music, deep soul." Tommy was invited to perform on local TV shows, and even national stations started reaching out. But he didn't let it change him. He still worked at the garage during the day and played music in the evenings. He said to one interviewer, "I'm not doing this to be famous. I just want to keep the music alive." He didn't wear fancy clothes or try to act like a celebrity. He stayed humble, grounded, and true to who he was. That's what made people love him even more. One evening, he got invited to perform at a big city concert. At first, he hesitated, but the organizer said, "This isn't about fame. It's about hope. Your music gives people courage." So he went. When he walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted in cheers. Thousands of people were there, holding up their phones, waiting for him to play. Tommy looked out at the sea of faces and felt something deep in his chest. He remembered that first night, how everyone had laughed when he walked on stage with his old guitar. Now that same kind of crowd was silent, waiting for him to play the first note. He smiled softly, adjusted the mic, and said, "Thank you for listening to a mechanic with a dream." Then he began to play. The hall filled with music, gentle, emotional, and pure. The audience swayed, some with tears in their eyes. For those few minutes, it didn't matter who they were or where they came from. They were all connected through the sound of one man's heart. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. People stood clapping, shouting his name. But Tommy didn't raise his hands or take a bow. He just smiled humbly, nodded once, and whispered a quiet thank you. He walked off the stage, clutching his guitar like a piece of his soul. Backstage, one of the organizers said, "You just made history tonight." Tommy shook his head gently. "No," he said with a smile. "I just played my song." And that was the truth. The man who everyone once laughed at for stepping on stage had now become the symbol of simple dreams that refused to die. The night of the concert stayed in everyone's mind for a long time. Videos from that evening spread across the internet faster than anyone expected. Clips of Tommy singing with his guitar reached every corner of the world, from small towns to big cities, from quiet homes to crowded cafes. People listened not just to his music, but to the story behind it. He didn't have fancy lights or backup dancers. There was no showy outfit or big stage setup. It was just a man, a wooden guitar, and a song that came straight from the heart. That's what made people stop scrolling, stop talking, and just listen. After that night, letters started arriving at his home. Some were handwritten, some typed out carefully on computer paper. People shared their stories of struggle, pain, and rediscovered hope. A man from another country wrote, "Your song helped me smile again after losing my job." A woman shared, "I played your music to my sick father every night. It gave him peace." Tommy would sit on his porch each evening reading those letters with quiet eyes. Sometimes he smiled. Sometimes he cried. Each message reminded him that his music had become more than a sound. It had become a kind of light for people in dark places. But even with all the fame and love, Tommy stayed the same. He still fixed cars during the day. He still wore his old boots and faded shirts. The townspeople often told him, "You could live anywhere now. You could buy a big house in the city." He'd just laugh and say, "Why would I leave the place that made me who I am?" He never cared for fame. What mattered to him was connection, real human connection. And he never wanted to lose that. Months passed and his music career started to take a more solid shape. A small label helped him release a few more songs, all written by him, all telling little stories about life, love, and quiet courage. None of them had fancy music videos or expensive marketing. Still, they reached millions of listeners online. People said his voice made them feel calm, like an old friend was sitting beside them telling a story. His songs reminded people of things they had forgotten: family dinners, long walks, laughter, and the comfort of being alive. One day, Tommy was invited to a large music award event. He had never been to anything like that before. The organizer sent him a suit, arranged his travel, and asked him to prepare a short speech in case he won. When he arrived at the venue, the lights were bright, and photographers were everywhere. He looked a little out of place, quiet, humble, carrying his old guitar case instead of a shiny designer bag. But when people recognized him, they treated him with deep respect. Some famous singers even came up to shake his hand. One of them said, "You reminded us why we started making music in the first place." Tommy smiled and replied, "Music's not about being famous. It's about feeling something." When his name was called for Inspiration of the Year, the whole crowd stood and clapped. He walked slowly to the stage, looked around, and took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not a star," he said softly. "I'm just a man who fixed cars and played songs for himself. But I've learned something. Sometimes life hides your purpose behind everyday work. You just have to keep believing that what you love matters, and one day the world might hear it." His words touched everyone in the room. Many wiped their tears as he ended his short, simple speech with a smile. After the event, his popularity grew even more. Yet instead of using his fame to make money, Tommy started visiting schools and community centers. He played for children, for workers, for anyone who wanted to listen. He told them that everyone has a gift, no matter how small it seems. He said, "Maybe your gift isn't music. Maybe it's kindness or painting or helping people. Don't hide it. The world needs what's inside you." Those words started a movement. People began sharing their hidden talents online, using his story as motivation. Hashtags with his name appeared everywhere, filled with videos of people cooking, drawing, singing, and building things they loved. It was like Tommy's simple music had unlocked something powerful in others. He became a symbol of hope, not because he was perfect or rich, but because he was real. A few years later, his life slowed down a little. He still played music but preferred small shows, where he could talk to people face to face. One winter evening, he performed at a small town hall, the same kind of place where everything had started. When he walked onto the stage, he saw families, old friends, and even strangers who had driven hours to see him. He smiled warmly and said, "Feels like coming home." The crowd laughed softly, clapping as he began to strum his guitar. That night, he played songs that told stories, not about fame or money, but about love, family, struggle, and peace. The hall was quiet except for his voice. There was something magical about the way he sang. It wasn't perfect in a technical sense, but it was full of life. After the show, a little girl walked up to him with her mother. She held a small toy guitar and said shyly, "I want to play like you one day." Tommy knelt down and smiled. "Then start today," he said. "Don't wait for the world to believe in you. You start believing first," the girl grinned, holding her guitar tightly. Her mother thanked him with tears in her eyes. Moments like that meant more to him than any trophy or award. Over time, Tommy recorded one final album. It was simple, acoustic, and full of warmth. The last song on it was called "The First Note." It told the story of his journey, from the moment everyone laughed when he picked up the guitar, to the night he played for thousands who believed. When the song came out, people described it as a goodbye and a thank you. The lyrics were honest. He sang about failure, faith, and the strange way life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. The chorus said, "They laughed when I played the first note, but I played anyway. Now the sound lives on in hearts, long after I walk away." Listeners from all over the world left comments under the video. Some wrote that they listened to it before sleeping. Others said it reminded them to never stop believing. It became his most loved song, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Years later, even when Tommy stopped performing as often, his music continued to live everywhere, and in cafes, in cars, on radio stations, and in quiet moments when people needed comfort. He spent his last few years mentoring young musicians, teaching them to play from the heart. He told them, "Music without honesty is just sound. Don't chase fame, chase truth." And he lived by those words until the very end. When he passed away peacefully one morning, the world mourned him not like a celebrity, but like a friend they all knew personally. His songs played across television channels, and people gathered to sing his music together. His hometown held a small tribute concert. People of all ages came: children, workers, teachers, families. Everyone shared stories about how his song had touched their lives. A sign hung on the stage that read, "He played the first note and the world never stopped listening." Years later, a music teacher at a small school kept a framed picture of Tommy on her classroom wall. Whenever a student said, "I can't do it," she'd point to his picture and say, "He could have said that too." But he didn't, and so his legacy continued, not in fancy awards or fame, but in the hearts of ordinary people who dared to dream because of him. Tommy's story became a reminder that greatness doesn't start on big stages. It starts in small rooms late at night when no one's watching, when you play the first note, even if everyone thinks it's a joke, because sometimes that first note can change your whole life, and sometimes it can change the world.